Okay, Friday night. My
Friday
goodness,
night.
it's funny. Actually, I was talking with someone about, busy work weeks, which everybody has, and you and
Yeah.
I have them as well. And someone said, "Oh, it must be hard to do the Friday night podcast." I'm like, "No, that's actually the great way to lead into the weekend, where I'm exhausted going into the podcast, but usually afterwards, I'm feeling pretty energized."
It's so interesting, right? Like this is like an anchor for us.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about anchors in training, but this is an anchor to the end of the week. And like I look forward to it. I look forward to it so much that
Yeah.
I don't know, it's not an exhausting thing, it's an energizing thing.
No, but here's where the accountability of working with friends and training with friends really comes into play because there are times where I felt like saying, "Hey Ted, I'm going to skip," but then
Yeah.
I don't because I think like you said, it's an anchor. And then once we get going, it's actually enjoyable. So, that's training wise too. And I had someone suggest that we should do a podcast on what it what it's like to train with friends or how to build that community. It's so important to have people around you that help support what you're doing and maybe even put you in check at times, but really, sort of an accountability, also an encouragement at times.
Even if I think it's true, even if your friends aren't, you're not training with them.
Hmm.
So like, I have a lot of friends in triathlon that I don't train with,
Yeah.
right? But there's still an accountability there.
Hmm.
It's like, oh, hey, I've noticed you haven't been on Strava in a few days, or you haven't, I
Yeah.
noticed this, or we meet for coffee on Saturday and we talk about triathlon stuff.
Hmm.
And I think there is an accountability
Yeah.
built into that.
Hmm.
And I think it's even more so. You're right. If you are actually committed to like a Sunday ride with somebody,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
for me, my anchors are, we've talked about this before, my swim group,
Yep.
and it's really weird. I didn't swim this week. We'll talk about this because I've been sick, and I didn't swim the week before because I was sick. And but people ask,
Yeah.
like, because my wife still goes to the pool and, hey, how's Ted doing? And, you know, even people that I'm not really close with, I got a text message, hey, I heard you're sick. Hope hope things
Hmm.
are turning
Hmm.
around for you. And
Yep.
that's a community, right? Like
Yep.
that's
Yep.
what we're talking about, is community. And I think a lot of people, especially through the pandemic, lost a lot of sense of community.
Hmm. No, for sure. And obviously there's the platforms like Strava and Facebook that help connect electronically, especially around the endurance sport. And it is so important to have that because we all like to think we're mentally tough, which a lot of triathletes are because you got to get through the training, you got to get through the races, but it's okay to lean on people at times. And I always say, and you've heard me say it several times, I mean, this is an individual sport, but we never do this alone.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. And if you look at our Facebook page or other clubs' Facebook page, or even the Facebook pages that come out for each race,
Hmm.
there's a
Yeah.
lot of support
Yeah.
that goes into that. And people ask questions and people answer them. And you know at least on those networks, I've never really seen anyone get beat up.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think in when it like where social media can become a problem in like the political world, and
Yeah.
where you say something and everyone hates you.
Yeah.
I don't see that in the triathlon world.
Hmm.
Well, I see a lot of, hey, I'm really struggling with this, or hey, I just moved to this new area. I'd like, where can I swim? And I'm looking for a new coach, and everybody just gives their opinion, and no one ever says, oh, don't go with this person, or don't go
Right.
swim there because they're jerks. It's all positive, and I think that's a really good thing, because social media has been really put in this negative light of, it's a bad thing.
Well, I have to say that's the Vegas way. I think our community here is one of the most supportive endurance communities that I've ever been part of, and you're right. I mean, our Facebook page is so rich with positive energy and good information and different information that sometimes competes with each other, and that it's all good. That's okay to have different opinions.
No, and I love different opinions, right? Like I love discourse.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's one of the things I like about being in academics is reading papers and reading or talking to different experts and having actual different opinions
Hmm.
on these topics. And it's so good and it's so vibrant. And especially in our polarized world politically, triathlon doesn't have to be like that.
No, no, that's right. Well, and it's interesting, actually, once we're done here, I'm actually going to go meet up with my master's level advisor,
Oh, wow.
Randy Jensen, and he really, you know, put me on the path of the importance of discourse and discussion with each other, because that's how we learn and that's how we discover new information. And
Yeah.
but speaking of new information, what's
Yes.
this about you being sick?
Well, I don't even know the last time I wasn't sick.
Yeah,
Well, we mentioned it a little bit last week, but I guess now it's like, is it three weeks ago I got shingles,
yeah.
and which was horrible.
Mhm.
So if you're over 50, get your vaccines, folks.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Public service announcement, because honestly, it's horrible.
Yeah,
And then I raced with shingles at Oceanside,
yeah.
had an absolute horrific recovery, the worst
Mhm.
recovery from a race I've ever had. And I attribute that to, the beast basically being beat down by shingles. Then last Saturday, I got to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm ready to start training again. Went to the lake, had a swim, did a little, my legs still weren't completely recovered. So I did a jog/walk. And then later that afternoon, I actually started to feel sick. And I'm like, oh no, maybe it's just allergies or
Yeah.
whatever. And then Sunday I woke up and I was sick.
Mm.
And I was like, this is just unbelievable. But I know, like, I'm pretty sure it's because of, having shingles
Yeah.
and putting this, the stress of racing. And then there's been a lot of work stress lately. And so, yeah, I've been sick all week, and I finally got a little ride on the trainer last night, and we have a planned trip. I'm in St. George right now to train for, to do a train camp for the Ironman coming up in 3 weeks. So I did just a ride up Snow Canyon and back down tonight. Didn't feel great, but I'm coming around,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to be smart about it.
Hmm.
And I'm proud of myself for at least this week and even last week not training.
Yeah.
I literally said, I've got to like listen to my body now, because I didn't listen to my body because I raced Oceanside,
Hmm.
and I don't regret it. Like
Yeah.
I don't regret that. That was a great day. It was a lot of fun. And if the downside is, I missed 2 weeks of training and I got sick, and well, that it is what it is.
Yeah.
You know, the big downside is this: is that, we came up to St. George, I came up to St. George. My wife was supposed to come with me, but she got sick this morning.
Oh no.
I think I got her, I got her sick. So now I feel guilty.
That's even worse. That's right.
So, but anyways, it
All
is an
right.
interesting
So
thing because, well, we're gonna, we wanted to talk about like
yeah.
what you do as a multi-sport athlete, as a triathlete, when you get sick, and how difficult it is to deal with those things.
No, that's great. And yeah, so that's what I was going to say. And so tonight's almost a case study
Yep.
of applying this discussion of what do you do when you're sick, and how do you get through training, and or not training is probably the better way to put it, because not training is sometimes just as hard as getting out and training.
Yeah, and especially when you have stuff on the calendar, right?
Hmm.
Like if this was December, January,
Yeah.
whatever, you get sick, it is what it is. But you know, I'm nervous about this race in St. George in 3 weeks. It's gonna be tough. It's gonna
Yeah.
be hard. And I, I'm feeling like literally it's been 3 weeks I've been off. Yeah, 3 weeks of basically no training.
Yeah.
Um, when you got 3 weeks till an Ironman is mentally very stressful.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And it's interesting. I had a conversation with one of our colleagues at work, and who's also a triathlete, and he said, "Don't worry about it, Ted. Like you've got 12, 13 years of good training. You get a lot of hay in the barn already. And I'm like, it's true. And you have to kind of go back to that and rely on that. I think you've done that several times in your career.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've taken a lot of withdrawals from the fitness bank, but yeah, you know, it's easy to enjoy the journey of training for an Ironman or an iron distance race when everything is going right. It is so hard to enjoy the journey when everything is not going right, and getting sick along the way of a training program. I mean, it can really wreak havoc, and it can then, unfortunately, manifest. It can show up in ways that's not healthy for even others around you.
Yeah.
And it is relation. We had the podcast where we're really focused on relationships, and I think that was a really great podcast because the relationships are number one. You got to really maintain those, and the training and the racing is secondary. But it's easy to forget that. I missed a couple of days of training, and Laura's downstairs, so she can't hear me. So, but if she was on the podcast, she would have some fun things to say when I miss training. It's hard. It is hard mentally.
It's so hard when we could talk about brain neurotransmitters and the fact that we're continually flooding ourselves with positive feelings from working out,
Right.
and these stress responses that are now our norm. And when you pull those away, we think, oh, it's a psychological thing, but it's a chemical thing as well. And I think that's something to remember, is like when you feel that anxiety from not training, it's a real physiologic thing. It's not, people say, oh, it's just in your head, and you got to work it out. And you actually have to, in my mind, you have to accept that this is a chemical thing.
Yeah.
Right. And this is not just, your mind playing tricks on you or controlling you. It actually is, there's a physical manifestation that occurs.
And there are times where you get better by not training.
Yeah. Especially when you're sick.
Yeah. No.
And it's something that, I teach a general medicine class for athletic trainers. And we go through, I teach about colds and flus and management of them, and proper management of them, and how to deal with athletes that have colds and flus. And it's, the number one rule is don't train. Right? Like your body is under attack basically. And, a good way to think about it, John, is you have a finite amount of resources in your body, right? And normally you're putting a lot of those resources into training and rebuilding. But when you're having a viral infection, you have to put resources to your immune system, extra resources. And your immune system actually takes a lot of resources, and we don't recognize that. But it actually, it takes a lot of glycogen. It takes fat, it takes protein. It takes all of those things that normally we would be putting into recovering from training or to training, and puts it into another bucket.
Right.
And the funny thing is that if you don't allow that bucket to fill, you'll be sicker longer. And we've heard of this. Like, how many times have you read articles or podcasts of people that endurance athletes that they get a cold and it lasts for a month?
Yeah, right. Because they're trying to train through it. And we know that having a cold or being sick that way is very similar to training and racing, because we all experience, after an iron distance event, you feel like you're sick, and sometimes you do get sick during the race, but that feeling after a long endurance effort is very similar to being sick. So they're not additive. They're not building on each other. Being sick and training for long stuff does not necessarily equate a double training response.
Yeah. If anything, it's a double negative, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You're losing on both sides. You're not giving the resources to the training, and you're not getting the resources into your immune system. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lose-lose.
Okay, so let's talk case study here.
Okay.
So you and I met Friday night, and you seemed fine. And
Yep.
then you said you were going for a swim, and you're down at Lake Mead for Saturday, and you had that planned, and you had other people that you're going to meet there. Okay, thinking back, at what point did you start to suspect you were getting sick?
I think when I woke up that morning,
Okay.
I was like, you know what? There's something like I got a little, just a little something in my chest.
Yep.
And so, but I was like, it's probably nothing,
Yep. Yep.
maybe, and I was just thinking, well, it might be part of this shingles response I'm having.
Mm-hmm.
And so, silly me says, well, I'll swim easy. And I did. I actually
Yep.
did swim easy. Like it was like 2:15 per 100 pace. It was an
In
easy,
cold water, though.
and it was cold. No, I was cold. I'm not gonna
Mhm.
sugarcoat that. I was cold. And then, then I went out and it was 90 degrees by the time we started, I would do my run walk,
Yeah.
but I felt okay. Like
Yeah.
I didn't notice any, like I
Yeah.
didn't notice any respiratory issues at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then, got home, and then probably around 3 or 4 in that afternoon, I started to like just have a little cough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is weird. That's not
Mm-hmm.
not good. And I started thinking
Yep.
back, okay, to the morning when I woke up and I felt a little something. But and it's interesting you asked that, right? Because one of the things we do know in immunology and in colds and flus and even with COVID and is you're sick long before you're symptomatic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the virus entered my body
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 days probably before.
Right. Right.
And when you actually have symptomology, in general, the virus is on the way out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your is responding, and that's the symptoms are the over response of the immune system.
Right.
And so I know for sure that when I swam that day, I was, probably the virus was at its peak point.
Yeah.
And you had a good point. Like it was cold. Like when I got out, I was shivering.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Right. And then within 20 minutes, it's 90 degrees.
Yeah. So your
Like,
body is already dealing with some other stressors.
yeah.
Stress is stress. So, yeah.
The interesting thing is I measure my body temperature every night.
Mm-hmm.
So my ring, I have an Oura ring and it measures it. No fluctuation in body temperature,
Ah, interesting.
which normally like I've been sick before and like I'll get a fluctuation, but
Mm-hmm.
I never got a fever.
Mm.
And that's actually another thing we can actually talk about is like some of the rules of thumb to not train,
Yeah.
but
Well, that
anyway,
was going to be my question is what would you have had to woken up with to
yeah,
not have gone to the lake that day?
for sure a fever.
Okay.
If I'd had a fever, so like I looked every morning. If I
Hmm.
would have had like 1 or 2 degrees increase in temperature with that, I would not have went.
Okay.
Um, or if it would have been the next morning, like Sunday morning when I woke up, there was no way,
Hmm.
because I had it planned. It was going to be a 5-hour bike ride that day.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
That was already in the books,
Yeah.
and I didn't do it. I
Hmm.
literally just sat around all day and
Hmm.
didn't do anything.
Hmm.
So yeah, 1 day difference probably would have been, but like for me, a fever is an absolute no-go.
Yeah.
And then also for me, anything I feel that's in my chest. Like
Hmm.
I said, I felt something, but like actually like where I'm coughing and there's some respiratory component to it, I won't train.
Yeah.
There,
Right.
there's no way I'll like I know this is in the literature that chest related stuff,
Hmm.
no go.
Right.
Even and you know how you always you probably do the same thing when you're sick. It's like, okay, well tomorrow I'll get on the
Yeah.
trainer for a
Right.
half an hour. Tomorrow. So
Hmm.
literally on Sunday, I'm like, okay, well tomorrow, if my chest is clear, I
Yeah.
don't have a fever, I'll just jump on the trainer for like a half an hour.
Hmm. Hmm.
I didn't actually get on the trainer until Thursday night.
Okay.
And
Wow.
that's the first day I woke up and I didn't feel congested, like too much. And
Hmm.
I had nothing coming up. I had no cough.
Mm.
And so for me, that's a good rule of thumb that I teach. And that what I think is really well supported in the literature is once you've cleared and your chest is clear, as long as if you can, if this is this old saying, like above the neck, okay to train, below the neck, don't train.
Okay.
And then the below the neck, to me, that's fever as well, right? Because you can have a fever throughout your whole body. And so once that cleared, then I felt like, okay, I can train. But here's the other thing. I'm not like, even this weekend, nothing's going above zone 2. Mostly it's
Yeah.
going to be zone 1.
Right. Right.
Even I literally just went up Snow Canyon and my heart rate never went above 130. I just, because I'm not going to stress my body out, anything extra that I don't need right now.
Okay.
And I don't need to prepare for an Ironman. I don't need to be doing intervals right now. I need to be doing race specific stuff.
Yeah.
Not crushing intervals right now.
All right. So I like this and I like the recommendations, but let's talk more about I guess the unspoken part of it in terms of, okay, now you're sick and you've taken 3 days off, 4 days off, and how do you deal with that?
No, it's sometimes it's easy, right?
Yeah.
Because when you literally, like on Wednesday, I couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Like I didn't go to work. I worked remotely. I Monday I didn't go to work. I worked remotely. I just, I woke up and I didn't sleep well and I was just so tired
Yeah.
and could basically not get off the couch. That's easy not to train. Like
Yeah.
that's so easy.
Right. Because now you're just stuck. You can't. Yeah.
You can't, right?
Yeah.
So those are the easy days. Like when you're feeling really bad,
Yeah.
it's when you're kind of in that in between, when you're starting to feel better, or you're on the way down, right? When the symptoms are starting. And like even honestly on Sunday, I could have probably trained.
Yeah. Right.
I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, there still is a mental component, and you mentioned it, like being mentally tough, right? Like, let's hypothetically say on my training peaks, it says Monday recovery. Monday's normally a recovery ride for me. Monday recovery ride 1 hour.
Yeah.
If I'm that A-type personality,
You're gonna
I
do
might
it.
look at that. So, well, that's what my coach has.
Yeah.
For me, right? Okay, Tuesday's a swim and run with some intervals at the end. Well, it's on my training peak, so I have to do it. And so I think that's, for some people, that's a real problem, is to especially when they're working with a coach. Yeah. Is to not disappoint and not fail.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's hard for people. And then even if you're self-coached, right? It's like, it's hard. It's super hard.
No, and you're right. When you're that sick that you can't do anything, you're right. That's the easy call. And I remember a few years ago before a race that we were traveling to, I was sick, this pre-COVID, so it wasn't even COVID. And my wife said, what are we going to do? I said, well, I'm not going. It was such an easy call because I was that sick. And she went off and attended the race. Unfortunately, she got sick on the way. So then she couldn't do the race either because she was now somewhere else and couldn't do it.
But do you want to know the interesting thing on that? So let's say she would have got sick the next day after the race.
Yeah.
It would have been worse.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And that's something we always like, oh, if I only would have done this, or only, that actually may have been the best thing that ever happened to her, was getting sick, because I think she got sick the night before the race or the day before the race.
Yeah.
If it would have been 1 day later, and she would have raced, it's because, like, once again, we say getting sick. Well, that's when you have the symptoms.
Yeah.
Okay,
so now,
but again, you need an early warning system.
Yeah, but it's easy when it's bad. Okay,
yeah.
It's that middle ground, and you start playing tricks with yourself. Is it allergies? Is it just old age? Is it this or that? Should I go out and try to train? And this is where it really is. It's such a vague answer, but you've got to listen to the body,
Yeah.
and you got to know when not to train. I have done things where I've tried to get out, and I may get 100 yards, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing it today. And you go back in, and you gotta listen. Your body will tell you. We always talk about gut feelings. That's your body telling your brain something, like gut brain connection. And but there are times where your body, you got to sense when you are not going to get a training response from that workout.
Yeah, and I love that because there is the sense, but then there also is metrics that we can use.
Yeah.
So, and I know there's a lot of people that don't, they're not into the metrics.
Right.
Well, one of the really key metrics, and it didn't happen to me because I wasn't actually training the week that I got sick, but looking at heart rate and power on the bike.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we know pretty well, like at this power in general, this is going to be my heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And yes, it fluctuates over time, but it doesn't fluctuate huge numbers like 20,
Right.
30% in like a couple of days. So one of the things that I've always been attuned with is that if everything's going normal and I start riding and I'm like, and I kind of have a number that for me, like 200 watts is about a heart rate of 125 plus or
Mm-hmm.
minus 5. But I've noticed this in the past is if I'm going to get sick, all of a sudden that 200 watts is 140,
Right.
145. And that right there is a super big indicator. Get off the bike,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Especially if everything else is the same. I know it's hard if you go to like somewhere hot, you go to altitude, but I'm saying if you're on your trainer in your house or you're doing your normal ride, normal conditions, and your heart rate to power is not matching what it normally does. And if you're running heart rate to pace,
Yeah.
if your heart rate all of a sudden becomes elevated, that's an early warning sign.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people don't, once again, they don't wear heart rate monitors, or they don't have a power meter, or they don't pay attention to their pace when they're running or whatever. I'm telling you, like even if you don't use it for training, it can be a nice early warning system for
Yeah.
stress and getting sick
Mm-hmm.
and those things. I don't know if you've ever experienced that.
Well, I know that the heart rate variability research continues to evolve, and it's getting better and better. It's better because our understanding of heart rate variability, as well as the instruments to measure heart rate variability, are getting a bit better, or at least we're understanding which instruments are good and which instruments aren't good.
Yeah.
And so I think this technology is going to continue to evolve, and we're getting this machine learning, the AI, the artificial intelligence built into these algorithms that will help us make some of these decisions that are not always easy to make. And it's, I say, listen to your body. It's like, well, what is that? That's, because that's the mind trick that we, sometimes have to play in terms of getting out and getting a training session in when we're, dreading it, or it's, we're not as excited, motivated to do it. So how do you separate that out from a subjective perspective to when you should get out? And this is where I think technology is going to help in the algorithms, but we're still ways off. It's still not quite there.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I also like the way you said about there's days when you've gone out and you're like, you go in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and like,
Yeah.
this is
Mm-hmm.
not good today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tough, right? Because we look at that as when you bail on a training session as you failed.
Yeah. Right.
And how do we change that mindset? You bailed on that training session, and that's the best possible thing you could have ever done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like you should get double green on your training peaks that day because you made a really mature
Yeah.
decision. And I don't mean mature being old, I mean mature athlete decision.
Right. Right.
That this was not in my best interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, honestly, John, I don't know how you do that. Like how, you can, because it's so hard because we have
Mm-hmm.
all these external pressures or internal, not even external, internal pressures we put on ourselves.
Yeah. Well, this
And
is where, the overtraining response is very real
yeah,
for endurance athletes. And we're even seeing some pro triathlete stories of pro triathletes all of a sudden having stress fractures or
Yep.
pulling out of races for different reasons that are, probably really related to overtraining, because it is, it's we've got to let our bodies adapt, and if we just don't give it time, we actually go in the reverse direction of getting better and getting fitter.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And but the question still is like, how do you teach this, or how do you
Yeah,
gain this maturity? And it's easier for, I think, more experienced athlete like that has hay in the barn,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, when you're a relatively new athlete, I think it's even more difficult.
Well, this is where a coach comes into play. It's like having that objective perspective of the training program, and a coach also will have a sense of the time that it takes to get trained, and a few days off, it's not going to matter. How many times do you do a little circle and outside your house to get rather than 49.9 miles on a bike ride, you get 50. That little circle is not going to matter in the long run of your fitness, but we still do it. And
Yeah.
so, a coach can have a different perspective, that they're not as focused on that, point, getting that clock to roll over just a little bit more, and give some perspective in terms of the long, the big picture of getting fit for an event.
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, but so many of us have this personality that we're completers,
Yeah, yeah,
right? And I'm as guilty as anyone for having like a 10-mile run in my
yeah.
in the plan, and man, at 8 miles I should go home and I don't.
No, no, we're both are. Yeah, it's hard. It's easy to say it. It's hard to do it.
And really that last 2 miles did nothing for you.
Yeah, right.
You said 0.1 miles. 2 miles means nothing. Like when you've done 8,
Oh,
and it's
I'm,
hard.
I am so guilty of coming in, and my odometer on the bike will say 0.95, whatever it is, and I have to roll it over. And it's,
When we look at the research on this stuff and
yeah.
training response, and we can get into different training pathways, and
Hmm.
we're not going to go down that road today, but most of the training responses happen in the first 30
That's
to
right.
40 minutes,
That's right. Hmm.
right? To get to the level for the kind of the next big benefits, it's like 4 hours,
Yeah.
5 hours, where you truly do, work on the metabolic pathways for utilizing
Hmm.
fatty acids as your fuel source. You really do need to go pretty
Yeah.
dang long to
Yeah.
get to that. So the fact that if you take your 2.5 hour ride and you make it a 2 hour ride, there's probably like less than 1% gain
Yeah. That's
for
right.
that extra half hour, right? And then we look at, overtraining or whatever, but just even life, right? You mentioned relationships.
Hmm.
What happens if you come home a half hour early and you do something with your wife or
Yeah.
your
Right.
spouse or your husband? Was that 1% training worth what you could have gained in your
Hmm.
relationships?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
No,
mean,
and this is where I love the phrase minimum effective dose.
yep.
And in my story this year, I've written off really competing at races. And so now what I'm doing is I'm trying to just do a minimum effective dose to be able to get to the start line and get to the finish line. And so that it's exactly what you're talking about, is rather than, going out for a 2 hour ride every day, um, if I do an hour ride on the trainer, and even set at 120 watts, that's my minimum effective dose. And I can get it done, and then I can go do some other things. But it's not a hard workout, but all I'm trying to do is complete an event as opposed to compete an event. And so to get to that high level, okay, that's a little different story. And that does take, that 1% more or whatever it is going to tip you in the right direction. But, right now, enjoying the journey is about enjoying the journey, and it's about getting to the start line and getting to the finish line. And we don't always need to be breaking ourselves down to get that fitness. It should be enjoyable.
No, I completely agree with you. And the problem with a lot of us is, and I know you're the same way, nothing makes me happier than being out on my bike.
Yeah, yeah, right, right, right.
Like that is my like absolute happy
Yeah.
place.
Mm-hmm.
And like I almost start salivating as it's time to get ready for a bike ride, especially when it's somewhere like
Yeah.
new or cool, or
Yep.
like even today, like on Snow Canyon, I'm looking up and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like such an awesome place to
Yeah.
be.
Right.
And um I love it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely love being on my bike. And
Mm-hmm.
that, that's part of the allure, but can also be part of the problem.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Because it
Fortunately,
comes
I
at a
don't
cost. I
always,
mean, it's
yeah,
time.
yeah. Fortunately, I don't love being on the trainer that much.
Mm-hmm.
So that's good in the winter. It keeps me a little
Yeah.
bit more, a little bit more grounded. But yeah, I think you're somewhat like that too. I mean, I think you really love riding your bike.
Oh, totally. And this is the hard part about missing workouts is now you're missing that part that you enjoy. And this is why I can get a little cranky when I go through a series of days when I'm not sick and I miss workouts. That's where I get the crankiest because I'm like, no, I want to do that fun stuff. And for whatever reason I can't because of this or that or something else takes up some time. So,
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? Like and usually it's work that gets in the way, right?
yeah, right.
It's like, oh, I got to do this, and I've got to do this, and I got to do this, and oh, and then I know 4 weeks ago I promised somebody that tonight I would do this,
Yeah,
and I planned in my mind that I'd be able to train in the morning,
right, right.
and then something, I had to go to work early or whatever, and so then yeah, that day is like gone,
Yeah,
and you almost feel like you feel bad,
yeah, right.
right? And it's like it's and it's hard not to. And
Yeah.
I think it's good we're sharing this because I think a lot of people feel this and they sometimes would, feel guilty for feeling that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a natural thing, especially if you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it is. And that that's the fun of doing endurance training and the downside too is the long stuff takes a lot of time out of the day. But you can find that happy medium. I do believe in really working into lifestyle. And what you and I have really done is, although you more so than me right now, is commuting into work, and getting your exercise that way. And I think there are ways to try to build that into your regular routine. But then
It's
when
so
you're sick,
funny.
you get out of that.
It's so funny. These last 3 weeks, I haven't commuted,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I have had to make a conscious effort when I'm driving home from work, especially, to not get upset.
yeah, yeah. Right, right.
Traffic in
Yeah,
Las Vegas drives me
yeah.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've literally, when I'm leaving work, I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
it's gonna be 40 minutes.
yeah,
Don't get mad.
yeah,
Take it easy.
yeah.
Put on a good podcast. Learn something on your way.
Right.
And I literally have to talk myself down before I actually get in the car.
Yeah,
But when I'm commuting, it's not that at all. Like it's just like,
yeah.
okay, here we go. Time.
No.
Oh, 4:30, time to leave work.
Yeah,
Okay, good. All right. I'll be home maybe I'll be home at 6. That's
yeah,
great. I don't care. Like, I don't want to make it home in 40 minutes.
yeah, yeah.
Right. And I get home and I feel so good about everything. And it's tough.
Oh,
And
it is. Yeah,
I know
yeah.
you're like you love commuting.
No, totally. And I have not been commuting as much for different reasons. And it is, and I do exactly what you do as well. I'm driving home and I'm like, okay, let's just drive home. We're in no hurry. Let's just, because it's easy to get caught up in the traffic and people, cutting you off and this and that. And it's like, just try to go with it. But it is more stressful driving to and from work than biking to and from work. So,
It's exponential for me.
yeah,
If anything, biking is a stress
yeah,
reliever for
yeah,
me.
that's right.
Driving is a stress, makes my stress worse. There's times when I'm at work and it's like 5 o'clock and I'm like, if I just work for another hour,
Yeah.
the traffic's going to be better.
Yeah. Right.
And the truth of the matter is it is, and I'll get home 6 minutes faster.
Yeah. Right.
Right? What's 6 minutes?
I know
But
it's
mentally, it's like
it's it's
it's
nothing.
crazy.
Yeah. No, it's funny actually. I did this with my class one time in terms of the math of how much time you save if you speed a little bit versus just doing the speed limit. And on a typical commute, it's like 3 to 6 minutes, and it's like, is that worth all the stress of doing that? All right, so now let me go the other route. Now you're starting to feel better.
Yeah.
How do you work back in, knowing that you've taken some time off,
Yeah.
and how do you start training again to where you don't overdo it, or set yourself backwards at that point?
I think number one thing here is you guys that listen to your body, but
Hmm.
heart rate. For
Yeah.
me, it's heart rate. It's
Hmm.
I will not go over 130 beats a minute right now. I
Yeah.
just won't,
Okay.
because I don't want to put myself into that level of
Hmm.
stress and have
Hmm.
cortisol responses, and so and slowly bring it back, right? um I also can control it a lot better on the bike.
Yeah.
Running's a little harder to control your heart
Right.
rate,
Hmm.
because next thing you know, you're going up a little hill and your heart rate
Hmm.
comes up. But on the bike, you just shift down and you can spin.
Yeah.
And swimming is also difficult, to control your heart rate and to know where you're at. But just set your paces a little bit lower. And once this is a time for me, like I'm gonna try and swim tomorrow morning, and I'm gonna go to the pool, the Sand Hollow Recreation Center,
Yeah.
and I'm going to work on technique, because I
Yeah.
haven't
Right.
I haven't been in the pool all week. So it's like, okay,
Hmm.
it's a good chance. I have no goals for time. I'm going to
Yeah.
go in. I'm going to say, this is a technical swim session,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to get upset if I'm swimming slow, because the goal is to actually swim slow.
That's right. Right.
And then I'm going to run tomorrow. Same thing. The goal is for me is I'm going to try and run one loop of the Ironman course,
Okay.
and I've already told myself it's a run walk for me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do like a 5-1 or a 6-1, so 6 minutes running, 1 minute walking,
Hmm.
and I'm not gonna let my heart rate get out of control.
Yeah.
I'm just not. And for me, I don't care if I'm running 8:30 pace, 9-minute pace,
Right.
whatever it is, because once again, I know that the response I'm looking for
Hmm.
is endurance.
Hmm.
Because I'm trying to train for an event that's going to be like 11 to 12 hours.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So going fast right now, it's not going to do me any good.
Hmm.
It's only going to cause more stress to the system, and
Hmm.
I'll get a good response from the volume rather than the intensity. And I think it's easy in triathlon to do that, because we can actually gain so much with endurance
Yeah.
stuff. I think like in team sport athletes, it's a little bit more difficult, because every time they go out and practice or play, there's a lot of intensity built in.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
you're playing basketball, you have to jump. Playing volleyball, you have to jump. You have to
Hmm.
land. You have to move with power. In triathlon, I mean, we've talked about this before. The propensity for people to do too much intensity already,
Hmm.
especially when you're training for an Ironman.
Right.
Where the goal should, in my opinion, very rarely be intensity, especially
Mhm.
leading into the race,
Yeah.
where we're trying to get more and more race specific. Intensity needs to come down.
No,
So
I love that. That's spot on. And the other way I approach it when I start getting back in after being sick is I'm just trying to work back in the habit of training. So I want to train at this time of day,
yep.
even if it's a short thing. I say that's my placeholder for my run or my bike or my swim. And so just trying to work it back into that daily routine.
Yeah, and I think that holds true even when you take a break. So
Yeah.
let's say you take a winter break.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to get into the routine of, okay, like I'm not training.
Yeah.
And so you're right; those placeholders can be really impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's super hard. Like when you've taken a month off,
Yeah.
physically it's hard. We get that, but mentally, I think it's even harder. Like
Yeah. right.
Once you're in the routine, we've talked about this before, that routines are built, and the research says like 45 to 60 days it takes to build a routine,
Hmm.
but it doesn't take that long to get out of the routine.
No, no, that's just it. And I think that's part of the stress of being sick is we start thinking we're being lazy or we're going to, develop bad habits. But, a couple of days, a week, you're not going to throw away all your good habits that you've already.
Yeah.
And again, this is where you got to have the community. You got to have other people around you that help reassure you sometimes and give you the confidence that it's okay to rest and get healthy.
Some of the biggest gains I've ever made were taking a week off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and this is no lie,
Yeah.
take literally a week off,
Yeah.
just walk away.
Hmm.
And yeah, the first day or two coming back in each sport can be a little bit, it doesn't feel great. But man, like the gains that happen for the next couple of weeks
Mm-hmm.
are so good.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but once again, if you're 6 weeks out from a race, that mental ability just to walk away,
That's tough.
it's tough. But man, the benefits that can happen,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you've been on that edge for a while,
Yeah.
where you haven't been able to fully recover, man, it can be so good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
I
yeah.
know there's coaches out there that prescribe that, and then people don't follow it.
Yeah. Right. That's hard. That's hard to say I'm going to take a week off because you're afraid. But this is, you got to have the confidence that you're building fitness but it's hard to walk away from a sport for 7 days.
It's easy when you have to, right? Like when you're sick, let's say, and that's easier when you're sick. But like you finish an Ironman, it's not that hard. I'm sure to take a week off,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Right.
Because you recognize, hey, my body's got to recover. Like I don't feel good. My legs are shot.
Yeah.
That's a relatively easy thing. But like I said, 6 weeks out,
Mm-hmm.
that's a mental battle for your
Yeah.
for your soul.
Right. Right.
I was reading an article that was talking about this. It was actually talking about with coaches and coach athlete relationships, and how many coaches hate to do that
Mm-hmm.
because the athlete's paying them, right? So the athlete's paying them, so they should be putting stuff in their training.
Yeah.
And if they say, well, you're not going to train for a week, they're like, oh, so then I shouldn't pay you this week,
Yeah. Right.
right? But they're paying you to when they're recognizing that actually this is the best thing for you,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay, and I'm giving you the permission, so you don't have to come up with that mental fortitude yourself.
Yeah. Right. That's right.
But it's a difficult balance, and it's a conversation that a coach and an athlete need to have well before this even occurs.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be times when the metrics are such that we're going to say you need a week away,
Mm.
or you need 3 days off, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and that's part of this package.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting. I think it was a podcast that was talking about it and how difficult that it put a strain on a relationship of a coach and an athlete. Have you heard
Mm-hmm.
have you heard of that?
For when a coach says take time off, oh sure, because I mean this is you've got to have a good relationship with a coach because when you're paying the coach for that trust and what I love hearing is when athletes talk about the coach that they're working with and they just say this is what the coach has told me to do. I mean you got to believe that is in your best interest and that's what having that coach athlete relationship is all about. And if you keep doubting your coach, it's like, well, why are you working with this person if you're going to challenge the coach at every turn? It's you gotta
Or
believe it.
yeah, you're at every turn, but I just contend they may only doubt the coach when the coach says not to train.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, right.
Right? Everything else, you can put everything on that training log. Hey, you're going to train every day, twice a day. Okay, good,
Yeah,
good, 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 good.
yeah,
And then all of a sudden you see a week of nothing, or
yeah,
3 days
right.
of nothing, and then it's the questioning,
Yeah,
right? It's the questioning only comes from the not.
yeah, right, right.
It's an interesting thing. It's a super interesting thing.
Well, and I think this is the challenge, I think, of a lot of people in terms of training. And I always, when Biggest Loser came out, I actually enjoyed watching that initially. because it showed the transformation that people could achieve. But what I ended up not liking about the show was that all the exercise was always hard,
Yeah,
and it was always to exhaustion, or it was always at a high intensity. That is not sustainable exercise.
agreed.
And yeah, and so, I think that it's so important for people really to be having their sight on a long-term vision as opposed to these short gains. And exercise does not need to be unenjoyable all the time. There's times that you got to have, you're going to have some hard sessions, but it's you should not always be looking for a coach that always is going to make things hard for you.
Yeah, no, it's so true, and it's difficult from the coach's perspective. Like, once again, this podcast was talking about that, is like when you find those athletes that only want the hard sessions,
Yeah, right, right, right.
and you know that
That's
it's
not the
not,
important part. Yeah,
and you know that that's not what's
yeah,
in your best interest,
yeah.
and then and as a coach, like, you're making your livelihood, right,
Mhm.
by keeping people happy, basically, and having this relationship with them, and you're afraid as a coach, this was in this podcast too, that you're afraid they're going to leave you for somebody else.
Yeah, right, right.
And the truth of the matter is, you should just let them go, because
Yep.
if they don't believe in the process and in your process, then and you're constantly just you're making these decisions to basically make your athlete happy rather than make your athlete the best they can be.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably not a good relationship.
No, that's right. And it'll break down. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I mean, those are tough things, and we actually haven't talked much about like coach athlete
mhm,
dynamic before,
mhm.
and it's so interesting. I've spent most of my career around athletes and coaches. It's
Mhm.
been interesting because I've been on the periphery a lot of it,
Yeah.
right? Like, as an athletic trainer, I'm seeing both sides of this, and I've seen it in many sports, and I've seen
Mhm.
many relationships, and I've learned so much, just from observing.
Hmm.
And I should write a book about that. From
Well,
this,
we are going to get an expert on in the psychology area. I will check and see if he also does talk about this coach athlete relationship, because it's important. And I think this actually falls in that same window of friends and training, because
yeah,
that is that, a lot of times we see these dyads, we see these pairs of people or even groups of people who train together, and they're relying on each other to sort of pull them through, or to give them advice. And so that yeah, this is a good topic. We should flush this out a little bit more.
I think so too. Maybe, yeah, maybe he can, if not, maybe he has somebody else that would be a good expert in that area.
Yeah,
Um, because when you do have a good, like, coach athlete relationship, man, it can be great,
yeah,
right?
right.
Um, and I don't know, like, we see this with pro athletes, and when they move from coach to coach, and
Mm-hmm.
how sometimes it can be really great and sometimes it can be horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it was on Slow Twitch, talking about Daniela Reef, and
Yeah,
the fact that she's decided to go on her own and be self-coached,
right.
and ever since then she has not been the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And people, obviously from the peanut gallery, oh, this is why she's not doing well. We don't know that.
No, no, we don't.
We don't know what that relationship was. We don't know
Mm-hmm.
if there's other issues going on, but it's easy, it's easy to make guesses
Yeah,
on,
right.
on that kind of thing. But I do find it interesting that when a coach recognizes that they need to move on
Yeah, right.
from the athlete,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's an awesome thing when a coach says, you know what, I'm not able to give you what you need,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's time for you to move on, and I'll give you a couple people, say, hey, these are a couple of people that I respect,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you'd be better off working with them. When I hear stories like that,
Yeah.
that actually does my heart good.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Because oftentimes it's the athlete that has to be the one that initiates that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's at least what I'm seeing, and what I've seen in my career.
Yeah, and coaching individual sports like triathlon that we're talking about is different. And you mentioned this than team sports. There are different dynamics, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
can't even, I can imagine, but in professional sports, when you're with a coach, and then the coach gets fired,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you've built up that trust and that dynamic, and
That's right.
especially if you've been with them a while, and it was nothing you did,
Mm-mm.
and nothing that the relationship, like that coach could have been the absolute perfect one for you,
Yeah. Right.
but
Right.
wasn't right with the management, wasn't right with the team.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are really interesting. Uh,
They are. They are. Well,
because you have no choice.
no, that's right. And you and I follow quite a few different pro triathletes, and it is interesting. Just about all the pro triathletes have a coach. I don't know what the percentage is that don't, because there's far more pro triathletes that we know about. But the top level ones that we know, and name recognition, just about all of them have a coach.
It's funny though, because all of them have a coach, but all of them seems like they've all tried self-coaching,
Yeah, yeah, right, right.
and it never seems to stick. Like
No,
they do it for a season, and they're
hmm,
like, yeah, that's not so good.
yeah.
But think
Well,
about it. What other pro sport would you consider self-coaching?
no,
Right?
it'd be a player coach. That's that's about it. Like softball or you
Yeah.
know age group soccer, or where you've got the player is also that's about.
Yeah, but any professional sport, I can't think
Yeah,
of a professional sport where
yeah,
there's not an actual coach, where it wouldn't be either like a self coach. Like even I'm thinking like, I used to really follow a lot of ski racing.
yeah,
Nobody was self coached ski
yeah,
racing.
right, right.
Everyone
That's
had a
true.
coach. It's weird
True.
in endurance sports. It seems like people dabble,
Mm-hmm.
but even you look at marathoners,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think of any like, because I follow some of them as well. None of them are self coached.
Yeah, right.
I think it might be a triathlete thing.
Well, and okay, so this takes us back to, even what I was saying, where you've got to listen to your body. Sometimes we don't do a good job. And
Yep.
even the professional athletes, they just don't do a good job of listening to their body. And this is why endurance sports are rich with injuries
Yeah.
and rich with being sick and then training and making things worse. So I don't know, maybe our message is we need to err on the conservative side with training, especially if you think you're being sick, is just take it easy.
But John, it's 3 weeks till the world championship.
I know. All right, but this is where, okay, so now we talk about the mental approach. I mean, and this is what I'm doing is I'm really adjusting my goalpost. I'm
Yep.
no longer trying to get to the same end zone that I was trying to get in a year ago when I was, targeting this race. I talked with someone today at the pool, and this is exactly what we talked about. I said, all we need is enough fitness to get us to the start line and then get us to the finish line. And there's not going to be any hero work. It's all, there's no matches to burn on race day. It is all about just having a nice even pace and enjoying the day. And so we adjust the goalposts when we do hit this period where maybe things aren't going well.
And the super cool thing about this race is it's the world championship,
Yeah, that's right.
right?
Right, right.
I don't have to qualify for a world championship here.
Oh,
And
that's right.
and the truth of the matter is, and I'll say this in all candor, is even if I was to be in top shape and get a Kona qualifying spot, I
Mhm.
wouldn't take it.
No, I know
Uh,
you've said this before. You're
I mean, the original goal of signing up for California was to get a Kona qualifying spot.
right,
I was
right.
ready for that. But now I'm looking at it like this, is like, if I do this race, then in October I'd have 70.3 world championship
Yeah,
plus Kona.
yeah, right.
And right now, I'm assuming to book into Kona for a week with
Yeah.
flights and everything, it's gonna be like $7,000-8,000.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't, even if all expenses paid, I would probably do it, but I don't,
There you go.
I'd rather go buy a new bike.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's funny. Oh, wait, we do have a comment, and let's close on this comment
yeah,
because it's a
perfect.
really good comment. It says, regarding listening to your body, I have a hard time telling whether I'm worn out or if I'm just being lazy. Any tips? And this is really, you know, I truly believe in practicing positive affirmation. I mean, you need to constantly tell yourself, especially when you're sick, I'm a good athlete, I'm a good runner, I'm a good biker, I'm a good swimmer. Even if you don't believe it at that moment, you've got to say it. It's really, it's affirmation. And you've got to trust that the training that you've been putting in for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years, 15 years, whatever it is, you don't lose that in a short period of time. And I know it's easy to say, but it really is affirmation that you got to remind yourself of all the training that you have done.
You know, a little tip is look at some old race photos.
Yeah, yeah.
And just be like, yeah, I've been there. So this is if you have some, right? I've been
Mhm,
there, I've done that. I'm good. Like I'm good with where I'm at. And
mhm.
and the difference between and what was the verbiage between the comment was?
I have a hard time telling whether I'm worn out or
Yeah.
if I'm being lazy.
Yeah. I think you already kind of hit the nail on the head. Go out 20, 30 minutes even
Hmm.
and push yourself a little bit. And do you feel better?
Hmm.
Right? If you're worn out, you won't feel better.
Yeah, that's true.
If you're lazy,
Hmm.
when you get out there and get going, you'll actually should feel good,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Like that laziness goes away once you get
Hmm.
out and actually doing your session. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, do that 20, 30-minute test. If you're still not feeling it, you're probably done too much. You're
Yeah.
probably worn out. And then also you can kind of say, I gave it a shot.
Hmm. Yeah, and I love that because I mean, my, way a lot of times is all I'm going to do is a part that I can chew off. So 1,000 meter swim. I know it sounds silly. I'll go do 1,000 meter swim. It takes, 15, 16 minutes. That's all, just, but that's a part that I can bite off on that day. And
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's
good.
it. That's the way to end this. All right, John. Well, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope you have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. Enjoy St. George.
The official start of the weekend.
Yeah,
Now that we're
yeah,
on
I
our
know.
podcast, we can actually say it's the weekend.
That's right. That's right. Got some
Awesome.
some good days ahead of us.
So yeah, it's going to be quite windy here tomorrow. I think it's going to be quite windy in Vegas too.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, it is.
so my plans have changed a little bit. I was going to do a big bike ride tomorrow, but I'm going to swim and run tomorrow, and then big bike ride on Sunday. So
Cool.
should be
All
fun.
right. Be safe.
Yep. Thanks.
All
Take
right.
care,
Talk
guys.
soon. Bye.